Williams lets it fly. That one's off. Reese left alone.
Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, two names that transformed women's basketball into a cultural flashpoint. But the biggest shock didn't happen on the court. Came from four numbers buried in an official WNBA salary document: $528,000, $574,000, $493,000, and $350,000. These weren't rumors, opinions, or social media speculation. They were the result of a system built on contracts, performance standards, and collective bargaining. The math had already been completed long before the public ever saw the results. And once those numbers became public, the conversation shifted immediately. Because this wasn't just about who earned more money, it was about what happens when a league designed around fairness produces an outcome few people expected. There was also a clause that many people discussing the situation failed to fully explain. That's where much of the misunderstanding began. Once you understand this clause, the $178,000 salary gap between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese stops being controversial and starts to make sense. It's known as the EPIC clause, exceptional performance on initial contract. Written into the new collective bargaining agreement, it was designed as a performance-based accelerator. The architects of the agreement created it after years of criticism that the previous system rewarded players at nearly the same pace regardless of their production. Under the old structure, a player making multiple All-WNBA teams in her early seasons could move up the salary ladder at nearly the same rate as a player who simply remained on the roster. Stars and bench players advanced together, and that was the problem the EPIC clause aimed to fix. Threshold is clear. Earn all-WNBA honors within your first 3 professional seasons, and the league places you on an accelerated path toward maximum contract eligibility. Players who meet that requirement move through the salary structure faster than the standard timeline allows. The language was intentionally designed to reward measurable production, not potential, not college reputation, and not draft position alone. Focuses strictly on documented professional performance verified by a selection committee. Caitlin Clark earned first-team All-WNBA honors in her rookie season, triggering the clause almost immediately. Once that happened, the formula had everything it needed, and her accelerated salary path began. However, this clause hasn't benefited Clark alone. Aaliyah Boston saw her salary jump from $94,000 to $574,000 after back-to-back All-WNBA selections. That wasn't a traditional raise. It was a contractual reclassification of her value based on 2 seasons of documented production. Her two-way impact reshaped Indiana's offense and defense, forcing opponents to adjust coverages, rebounding strategies, and overall game planning. When Boston earned consecutive All-WNBA selections, the clause triggered exactly as designed, and the salary structure reflected it. This context matters when evaluating where Angel Reese landed. The argument that the system favors Clark specifically loses strength once Boston's numbers are considered. Clause doesn't favor names, it rewards production. Reese entered the league as the 7th overall pick in the 2024 draft, which immediately elevated her above the baseline salary floor. Her rookie salary rose from $75,000 to $350,000, giving her a significant early advantage compared to players drafted later. Draft position clearly matters in the league's new structure. However, draft position only carries a player so far. The second accelerator, the EPIC clause, requires all WNBA honors. Draft position alone cannot satisfy that requirement, performance must do that. And that distinction explains where Reese's number ultimately landed. Through 2 full professional seasons, Reese has not earned an All-WNBA selection at any level. That isn't speculation or commentary, it's the result of decisions made by a selection committee that evaluates every player using consistent performance criteria, advanced metrics, and full season analysis. Through reviewing her production against the rest of the league, Reese simply hasn't reached that threshold yet. This is where comparisons become unavoidable. The salary sheet doesn't just compare Reese to Clark, it compares her to her own draft class. And that comparison significantly weakens the favoritism argument because other players from the same class are evaluated under the exact same system. Cameron Brink, the second overall pick in the 2024 draft, entered the league under identical structural rules, reinforcing that the system applies evenly across the board rather than favoring any single player. The Los Angeles Sparks selected Cameron Brink from Stanford, widely considered one of the most polished two-way forwards in college basketball. She entered the league as a defensive anchor capable of protecting the rim while also stretching the floor offensively, and the Sparks quickly built part of their rebuilding identity around her. Even after suffering an ACL tear during her rookie season that limited her development time, Brink's contract still climbed to $493,000. Her draft position, early production trajectory, and the league's contractual structure all worked in her favor despite the setback. Through the same amount of professional time, she sat $143,000 above Angel Reese. Sonia Citron, the third overall pick, joined the New York Liberty and immediately contributed as a versatile wing on a championship-caliber roster. She logged meaningful minutes during a deep postseason run, handled defensive assignments against elite perimeter players, and demonstrated the type of two-way reliability that front offices value when projecting contracts. Her salary reached $436,000, placing her $86,000 above Reese. Selected 7th overall, Reese landed below both players at $350,000, meaning members of her own draft class were already ahead of her on the contract ladder. Those players were evaluated under the same collective bargaining agreement and by the same selection committee, yet they advanced further in the same amount of time. This became especially significant when Reese publicly highlighted the gap between her salary and Caitlin Clark's. When the salary documents showed that Reese also trailed multiple players from her own draft class, the narrative quickly weakened. Public noticed, brands noticed, and even fellow players in her class saw the contrast, none of whom were publicly demanding explanations. This situation isn't about one player being favored over another. It reflects a system designed to measure on-court production, apply a formula agreed upon by both sides, and produce a number independent of popularity or social media presence. When Reese's salary landed at $350,000, it wasn't a statement about her visibility, it was a reflection of her performance within that framework. The same standard applied to Brink, Citron, and every player whose contracts were shaped by the clause. The system doesn't operate on preferences, it operates on measurable output, and at this stage Reese had not yet met the threshold. To understand how players entering the league with major expectations ended up on different financial paths so quickly, the story extends beyond the new collective bargaining agreement. The divergence began earlier, during their college careers. Caitlin Clark entered the professional ranks carrying 62 collegiate records and a playmaking profile that scouts had analyzed for years. Her college production wasn't simply about scoring volume, it represented an offensive system that reshaped defensive game plans at the national level. Teams weren't just trying to stop her scoring, they were trying to contain a playmaker who elevated everyone around her. When Clark entered the WNBA, she didn't rely on reputation alone. She produced immediately, setting rookie records in assists, scoring, and playmaking efficiency. She earned first-team All-WNBA honors in her first season, secured an All-Star selection, and earned a Team USA roster spot, where her efficiency placed her among the best players in the world. Each milestone was documented and eventually factored into the contract formula that rewards measurable production. Angel Reese's first 2 professional seasons told a different story. Her rebounding totals generated attention and looked impressive in box scores, but deeper analysis complicated the picture. A significant portion of her offensive rebounds came from her own missed attempts. She shot 39% from the field overall, converted fewer than half of her attempts near the basket, and struggled with mid-range efficiency. Her layup conversion rate also remained low despite a high volume of attempts. These inefficiencies created missed shots that contributed to her rebound totals, producing strong counting stats that didn't necessarily translate to offensive efficiency. Meanwhile, Clark's impact extended beyond traditional statistics. Defenses couldn't afford to leave her unguarded, which opened driving lanes for teammates, improved post-entry opportunities, and created wide-open perimeter shots across Indiana's lineup. That type of offensive gravity rarely appears in individual box scores but shows up in team performance, game planning, and teammate production. The All-WNBA Selection Committee evaluates that broader influence, and Clark's impact on Indiana's system in her first season was significant enough to earn immediate recognition. The salary gap between Clark and Reese becomes even less significant when considering endorsements. A parallel financial gap developed in the marketing world, measured not in thousands but in tens of millions. Nike evaluated Clark's early professional trajectory, including attendance, television ratings, and merchandise sales, before committing to an 8-year, $28 million footwear partnership. This wasn't based on social media trends but on measurable commercial performance. Nike's history of identifying generational athletes added weight to the decision, making it a long-term investment rather than a short-term experiment. Gatorade reportedly followed with a partnership valued at $50 million, reinforcing the scale of Clark's commercial impact and highlighting how performance, visibility, and market influence combined to shape her financial trajectory both on and off the court. Clark co-designed this personalized collection, which includes a water bottle and a towel featuring her Dream Big motto. Every brand involved had other athletes they could have chosen, yet each one evaluated the landscape and ultimately selected Clark. The commercial world does not commit hundreds of millions of dollars based on sentiment or social media buzz. Those decisions are driven by data. Across 2 professional seasons, the metrics connected to Clark produced a market response unlike anything previously seen in women's basketball. Reebok, however, made a different bet. Company signed Angel Reese, invested real marketing resources into the launch, built distribution infrastructure around the product, and rolled out a campaign with significant promotional momentum. But the shoes remained on shelves for months, failing to sell at the pace required to justify that investment. Gradually, marketing spending began to shrink. Advertisements stopped appearing, the product shifted to discounted retail positioning, and Reebok grew nearly silent about the campaign. Brands rarely go quiet when partnerships are performing well. Instead, they increase spending, build on momentum, release follow-up products, and feature the athlete in more campaigns. Silence in the endorsement world is rarely neutral. It often signals disappointment. Reebok's broader push, including its role as the official footwear partner of the Women's National Basketball League, reflected a pivot shaped by sales data and internal evaluations. The trajectory of the Reese partnership, from an energetic launch to markdown pricing and reduced visibility, became one of the clearest signals in the current WNBA endorsement landscape. Conversation intensified when the new CBA salary figures became public and Reese stated on social media that she deserved a $1 million base salary. Comment was not framed as a structured critique of how the Epic clause worked, nor was it paired with acknowledgement that earning an all-WNBA selection would trigger the salary growth she sought. Instead, it came as a direct public demand from a player whose signature shoe had already moved into discounted retail and whose all-WNBA resume remained empty after 2 professional seasons. At the same time, Clark's visibility surged through multiple developments, including recognition from major publications, endorsement success, and continued sell-through of branded products. Brands such as Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, and Wilson observed the contrast in real time, reinforcing the investment decisions they had already made. The demand also highlighted a misunderstanding of how salary value is generated under the new CBA. The Epic clause does not respond to public statements about perceived worth. It responds to on-court performance, particularly all WNBA selections. That is the primary path to a $1 million WNBA salary. Social media posts can generate attention and headlines, but they do not change contract figures. Clark's approach over the past 2 years has remained consistent: perform at an all-WNBA level, represent Team USA, expand brand partnerships, and maintain a public image centered on competition and production. That consistency is not accidental. It has become a measurable commercial asset. Companies committing to long-term, high-value endorsement deals need confidence that the athlete they support will not create reputational risk. Clark's public track record provides that assurance. Meanwhile, brands evaluating Reese's commercial potential have watched her public responses accumulate across 2 seasons. Each reaction either strengthens or weakens the narrative surrounding her marketability. When she responded to the CBA salary discussion with a public grievance, it created another high-visibility data point for sponsors assessing her long-term reliability. These impressions do not exist in isolation. They build over time, forming a broader picture that influences future investments. Contracts, endorsements, and valuations are not static. They shift with performance, perception, and evolving market dynamics. Clark's trajectory continues to develop, Reese's path is still unfolding, and the league itself is adapting to the collision of talent, timing, and economics at an unprecedented scale. The gap seen today may narrow, widen, or transform entirely. Ultimately, the question is not who appears ahead at the moment, but when the next set of numbers arrives, which trajectory the market decides was the right one all along.